Have you ever heard the phrase, money can't buy happiness? Back in the 1960s, it couldn't buy safety either. The wealthy thought they could. They built their homes like fortresses, gated, bolted, wrapped in steel and stone. They slept easy, convinced that whatever prowled the streets belonged in the slums, the gutters, to the shadows they'd never have to see. But fear doesn't follow rules. It doesn't stop at gates. It doesn't check bank accounts. It didn't matter who you were. A student in his dorm, a man at the bar, a businessman in his grand estate, a guard standing watch. And it always started with the lights. A flicker, a stutter. That moment when your stomach knots, when the air feels wrong, but you tell yourself, it's just a bulb, just a hiccup in the power. Then, you see it. A glow, thin, sharp, red as fresh spilled blood, sliding up the walls, crossing the ceiling, not searching, hunting. And then, click, it lands on you. You don't even have time to scream. No one ever saw his face, just that red glow. Because by the time it found you, you were already dead. Chambers of the Occult may contain content that might not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh shit. That was a great cold open.
I'm glad that you liked it.
I was not, you were like describing it. It's like a red glow climbing up the walls. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, just straight up. And then it's on me. Okay.
What are we talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Way to set the scene.
Welcome, everyone.
Anyway, welcome, Chambers of the Occult, episode
31. I am Jay.
I'm Kai.
And
Welcome back.
Yeah. We hope you're ready for some more of the usual. I was going to say nonsense, but that's the wrong episode. Welcome back to some of the morbid and weird.
Yeah. Yeah, we can put it like that.
Yeah. You know what you're getting into. You clicked on the episode.
I mean, there's definitely something weird about this red fucking blur that hunts and murders. So
Yeah. 1960s.
okay.
Let's get into it. We're heading straight to Brazil.
Nice. Love that place.
I realized that we really haven't covered anything in South America. So I was like, hey, Brazil.
We had. Whoa, yeah, we haven't.
No.
Because I was gonna be like, oh, boy painter of like Spain, but I was like, wait, Spain.
That was
Spain is not in South America.
No, not even in the same part of the globe.
No, it's not. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not racist. I swear.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah. So we're heading to the state of Sao Paulo. And it's a city with towering skyscrapers looming over winding alleys where like wealth and poverty exist side by side, what you typically expect in a big city.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one fateful night, a shadow figure would emerge from the darkness, leaving terror in its wake. Because
that's what they do, right?
Yeah, either that or, they follow you because it's your shadow.
What if you don't have a shadow? Like, what if? Whoa! What would you do if you just didn't have a shadow? Like one.
I would be very concerned.
Yeah, me too.
And I would say talk to your doctor, but they can't help with that.
Well, maybe they could. There might be like some medical thing behind it. Who knows?
Some medical thing. No, I think I would just probably lose it.
Right. So shadow figure starts
Yeah.
popping up.
Our story begins on the night of October 3rd, 1966.
Okay.
So in the quiet tree-lined street of Somar, it's in Portuguese.
Got it.
I can do my best, but there will be some names butchered.
No worry.
It was a wealthy yet unassuming neighborhood. Most of the residents at the time were settling for the night. There was a distant hum of traffic from the city center, and the houses were well kept. They sat behind iron gates, and the occupants were oblivious to the horror that was about to unfold.
Aren't they always?
I mean, I think even now we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely am. I have no clue what's about to happen.
No, I mean, like right now, like we're oblivious to the things happening around us.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
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 Always.
So inside one of his homes was a 19-year-old named Walter Bedran.
Okay.
He was alone. Perhaps he was buried in his studies, or he was unwinding from a long day. A routine evening, no different from other nights before. There was a soft glow of his desk lamp casting a flickering shadow across the wall. And without warning, darkness. Walter's...
Like in his room?
Yep. His lamp flickered once, twice, and then it died. It just plunged his room into darkness. And of course, that's when a chill runs down people's spine. They're like, oh, like, what happened?
What happened? Where
Yeah.
the fuck did the lights go? Yeah.
A power outage? Perhaps. But everything had been working fine just moments ago. So he hesitated for a second. He was listening. The house was silent. Too silent. The kind of silent that just feels wrong. So slowly and uneasy, he stood from his chair, moving cautiously through his corridors, his footsteps barely making any sound as he walked through the room, and then he reached for the light switch. Nothing. But something wasn't right, of course.
Mm-hmm.
His heart began to pound, the quiet ticking of the clock suddenly deafening in the darkness, and he turned towards the backyard, drawn by an instinct he couldn't really quite explain. Step by step, he moved towards the door, and as he reached the threshold, the air felt heavier.
Hell no.
A single breath escaped his lips, a small cloud of the cold night air, and then a flash. A thin, piercing red beam, cutting through the darkness, slicing across his face like the unblinking eye of a predator. And
Like
before
a laser.
before he could react, a gunshot shattered the silence.
Oh, so like a laser. Oh, okay. Oh. Oh. Okay, when you started this, it was like a red blur that crawled up and dropped up, like got me thinking like some creature, like paranormal.
Oh, and you're
But I
like,
was
Jay,
like,
you're not doing this. That's
yeah,
my
but
story.
I was like, but this is a true crime case.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not a. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So it's not like a rifle sniper laser. It's more of a flashlight.
Gotcha. Just like a red like flashlight, like a
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Like the ones that we use like in paranormal investigations.
Yeah.
Right? Like the red
Yeah.
lights. Okay.
The red light. It's a red light. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes your eyes easier to adjust to the darkness.
In the dark. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in the silence of the night, he got that red light on him, and a gunshot went off. Walter's body jerked violently. The impact sent him sprawling backwards. His breath hitched on his throat. His limbs were already growing numb, and as he collapsed to the ground, dead.
That quick.
Then,
Wow.
just as quickly as it had appeared, that light was gone.
Wow.
The quiet neighborhood of Sumer had just witnessed its first brush with a terror that was only beginning.
Did this terror have a name? I guess don't spoil it if you don't need to.
There is one. Would you like to guess?
The Red Light Bandit.
Yes!
What?
Yes! So this is known as the Red Light Bandit. But because takes place in Brazil, they know it as O Bandido da Luz Vermelha. But this is a red light bandit.
Didn't you just cover a Red Light Bandit?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's why I was like so surprised.
Yeah.
But so this is Brazil's Red Light Bandit.
Yep.
Okay.
The thing is, I actually just wrote that here somewhere. Let me find it real quick. Brazil had their own version of the Red Light Bandit. But this one was far more dangerous because this one was killing people.
Gotcha.
Because unlike Chessman, who was eventually caught and sentenced to death, this Red Light Bandit was still out there roaming free, striking at will, and proving that no one was safe.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, it was episode 29, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, episode 29. Jay covered Cheryl Chessman?
Carol Chessman, yes.
So Carol Chessman, the Red Light Bandit. So we've got kind of back-to-back Red Light.
The thing is, when I was
if you haven't
originally
seen that
searching
episode.
for, doing research on the Red Light Bandit, I was doing research on this one, and then without knowing, I was doing research on the other one. I was like, wait, how do we transition from Brazil to California? Does it make sense? And that's when I realized that there's two.
And then you were like, wait, these would both be good stories.
Yeah, so that's why I started with the California one, because that's the original Red Light Bandit.
Okay.
This one was, you could say, the second one. Because the Red Light Bandit in the United States was a decade earlier. Mm-hmm. Carol Chessman had gained that infamy, and now we're in Brazil with a new Red Light Bandit.
What year was this again?
Let me pull it up right now. This was in 1966.
Okay. Got it.
So once again...
That's funny. Anyway.
No, I'm actually very glad that you're like, they're red light. And it's like, it's not going to be...
I did not think it would be the Red Light Bandit because you just covered...
the Red Light Bandit.
And it was so funny. I don't know if you saw, but I literally opened up a new tab right now and I looked up Carol Chessman. And I was like, it is the red... I was like, what?
Yes. So this one is the Brazilian Red Light Bandit.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Okay, so just 10 days after the shocking murder of Walter Burden, the city of Sao Paulo remained, of course, in high alert.
Palo Alto back in California.
Oh no, wrong red light.
Wrong bandit.
Wrong bandit. Yeah. So once again, the crime, a young man gunned down in his own backyard by an unseen assailant. So it had sent fear through the community. Neighbors double-check their locks, they whisper of a faceless killer, and of course newspaper headlines warned that danger lurked in the shadows. But life in a big city never really stops, as we've covered in a lot of true crime stories. Like, people have this fear, but they just have to keep going with their daily routine. So now we're going to be moving to a different neighborhood, the neighborhood of Bella Vista. And Bella Vista was known for its vibrant nightlife, working class roots, and cultural diversity. The streets were still alive after the sunset. Bars and cafes brim with patrons, filling the air with laughter, conversation, and of course the occasional debate. So among this area, we're going to be looking at 23-year-old worker Jose Enas da Costa. Okay. He had a long day of grueling work, and like many others, he thought, I'm going to go to a bar and just enjoy a drink. So inside the bar, it was a lively oasis compared to just a lively backdrop against the city on the edge. You could hear the glasses clink, people talking, laughter. It was a kind of atmosphere that men just kind of enjoyed after a hard day's work at the bar.
Gotcha.
Swapping stories over drinks. So he took a sit at the wooden counter, resting his elbows on the well-worn surface, The bartender was pouring him a drink when another customer walked in. The door swung open. The slight creak drowned out by the sounds of the bar. A figure stepped inside. To any casual observer, this was just another person.
Yeah.
Just blending in that crowd.
Yeah, why wouldn't it be? It's someone walking into a bar.
Yeah,
Right?
but something about him was off. His presence, his demeanor, or the way that he carried himself. No one knew what started the confrontation. Maybe it was a misunderstood glance, a misplaced word, or maybe it was just the volatile nature of the stranger himself.
Okay.
Maybe Jose recognized him.
Just
Maybe
gave
he
off weird
didn't.
vibes.
Yeah. What is certain is that the tension bloomed between these two men. Thick as smoke and voices rose. There was yelling, screaming at each other. At first, a sharp word. Accusations. An exchange that grew too heated, too fast. The nearby customers turned their heads, their conversations coming to a quiet to see what was happening, the shift in atmosphere. And the stranger's posture grew rigid. His hand moved swiftly, and in a flash, a gunshot tore through the bar.
Mm-hmm. Just
Yep.
all right.
The
That's what was off about him.
Oh yeah.
he was intent on pulling out that gun.
Yep. The explosion just shattered the moment, reverberating off the walls and silencing the once lively establishment. A split second later, Jose collapsed, his body crumpling to the floor, his blood pooling beneath him. And for that moment, there was only stunned silence for that quick second, and then panic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy walks in who's odd. Everybody's staring at him. He walks up, pulls a gun, and he kills a man. It's like you're in shock, and then you're like, what do I do? What the hell is going on? Do I run? Do I get out of here?
There's that quick second of everyone hears a gun, quiet, and then they realize it was a gun, and then everyone starts to panic.
Yeah.
Yep. Women screamed. Chairs scraped against the floor. People ran, knocking over glasses, ducking behind tables, pushing towards the exit. The bartender stood frozen behind the counter, his mouth just wide open, the bottle in his hand slipping from his grip and shattering to the floor. Mm-hmm. The attacker was already moving at this point. In the chaos, he slipped through the panic crowd. His face burned into the memories of those who had a glimpse of him, but they would later struggle to recall any defining features. He was a ghost, a shadow, and before anyone could react, he was in and he was gone.
He was out.
So by the time the authorities got to the bar, the scene had already settled into just an eerie stillness. The lifeless body of Jose lay where it had fallen. The echoes of the gunshot still ring in some of the patrons who witnessed it. But the real horror wasn't just the death itself. It was the pattern. 2 murders, 10 days apart, 2 victims, both shot.
Gotcha.
One in the supposedly safety of his own home, the other one in a crowded public space. No motive, no connection, and as you saw, no warning. The police and the media began to piece together the similarities between the killings, and speculation started to go rampant. Was this a serial killer? A deranged madman? A ghostly figure just striking from the shadows? And the press had a field day.
Oh, of course.
Plastering headlines across morning papers, stirring speculation about a faceless killer haunting the streets of Sao Paulo. But one question loomed above all the others. Who would be next?
Oh, who would be next?
Yeah. So, after a month of the silence, the city of Sao Paulo dared to believe that the nightmare had finally come to an end.
I'm sure dared to believe is a key choice of words.
Keyword dared. Or believed, or, yeah. The newspapers had shifted focus, turning their attention away from the string of violent crimes that once dominated the headlines.
Yeah.
But Theories about the mysterious assailant who had been responsible for the murder sprees began to fade from public conversation. Had he fled? Had he been caught because of an unrelated crime? Or was he simply laying in wait?
Taking a break. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For a city that had been held hostage by fear, normalcy started to slowly return. The paranoia that once gripped the people of Sao Paulo, the wealthy and elite, they began to wane. Social gatherings resumed, security measures were relaxed, and the one persistent whisper of the masked intruder dissipated into the background.
Wow.
But as we know, peace, as so often it does,
Never lasts.
it's a fragile thing.
Yes, it is. So he disappeared for a while, just completely.
We will get into that
Okay.
because it was very difficult to find more information, and we'll talk about why later as well.
Gotcha. Okay, but people kind of thought he was gone.
Yeah.
And then...
It was 10 days between the first murder, a month before he would be seen again.
Wow.
On June 7th, 1967, we're headed to a different neighborhood. This one's called Jardim America, and it's one of Sao Paulo's most affluential neighborhoods.
Okay.
The district was home to politicians, business tycoons, foreign people. It had grand estates. People of wealth lived there.
Gotcha.
So among these homes stood the residence of John von Christian. And
You got this.
it's a Hungarian last name.
Oh, John von Christian, and then
John von Christian de Sarspatak.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
There's
all
a Z in there. Anyway.
And weird.
Yeah.
Those guys are weird over there. Hungry.
An industrialist of Hungarian descent. He was known for his business acumen, an aristocrat, and his home, of course, a testament to his success. Just a sprawling villa, gated, heavily secured. And inside, John was settling for the evening. You know, the world outside of his estate seemed distant. After all, Jardim America was a pinnacle of security, a neighborhood where crimes were meant to be an afterthought.
Yeah, affluent area. They weren't worried.
No. But that night, his home was being watched.
Okay.
Once again, that same figure moved through the darkness, completely undetected by the estate security. The intruder was patient, calculated, watching from the shadows, studying the property, and he had evaded capture for nearly a year.
It was a year at this point?
So that's what we'll get into,
Okay.
because it didn't start with that first victim.
Ah, okay.
Yep. So as the household settled for the night, the intruder made his move. A window cracked open. The sound was barely audible. And like a specter drifting through the halls, he got into the house. His gloved hands moved, quickly rifling through drawers, pocketing valuables. His trained eye was scanning just dimly lit rooms for anything worth taking. That's what he did best. Slipping in, taking what he wanted, and vanishing before anyone knew he was there.
Yep.
But this time he wasn't alone.
Oh.
A sharp sound echoed down the hall, a door opened, and that's where John von Christian had stirred. Perhaps he sensed that there was something happening in the house, maybe it was a nightly routine. Either way, the moment he stepped into that dark corridor, his fate was sealed.
He was done.
His eyes landed on the shadowy figure standing at his home. For a split second, there was only silence. Then, Gene lunged. He lunged at the intruder, but there was a gunshot as that happened.
Fuck.
So, the bullet through the stillness, like always. It's a quiet night. It's super loud. John staggered backwards, his body hit in the cold marble floor as blood spread across his chest. That's when the masked intruder didn't hesitate. He loomed over his victim, watching the light fade over John's eyes. Then he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving nothing behind but a corpse that lingered to the scent of gunpowder.
Bastard.
That's one way to put it, yeah. The morning after, you can imagine, Jardim America woke up in horror.
Mm-hmm.
News...
What just happened? What happened last night? How did
Exactly.
somebody break in?
So news of the industrialist brutal murder spread like wildfire. Headlights screaming of the Red Light Bandit's return. The whispers that once faded into background had roared back to life. More urgent, more fearful than ever before. The police arrived in full force, their frustration mounting. The killer had been silent for months, only to return with a chilling display of confidence and brutality. Sao Paulo was no longer just afraid. It was waiting to see who would be next.
What would happen next?
Now, the fear didn't subside. If anything, it just intensified.
Mm-hmm.
The murder of John sent shockwaves through the city. No longer was the Red Light Bandit merely a phantom thief lurking in the shadows. He was now brazen, unpredictable, and the wealthy elite were on high alert. Their once lavish lifestyles overshadowed by the creeping paranoia, and no amount of money
anymore.
could buy them safety.
100%. I mean, they slipped past the security.
Yeah.
Killed
Some
a
of the
man in his
wealthier
own
people
home.
got, because they had the money, they hired more guards.
Mm-hmm.
Some installed stronger locks, and some of them even armed themselves for protection. Others, because they had the money for it, of course, chose to leave the city altogether.
Yeah.
Richie,
Why
because
not?
they went to their country estates,
Mm-hmm. Far
just
away.
hoping to escape the horrors that were feeling inevitable. But the bandit, of course, had no intention of stopping. On the night of July 6, 1967, in the Ipingra neighborhood, Iparanga neighborhood, there's an R in there. This was a historic district known for its colonial architecture, affluent residences, security guards. And this is where security guard Jose Fortunato patrolled the perimeter of a grand mansion. It was a quiet night, the night that people find comforting. But Fortunato, quiet wasn't reassuring. Quiet meant something was coming.
Fuck.
The reason headlines had already put him on edge. A thief turned to murder, terrorizing Sao Paulo richest citizens. The thought was enough to keep any guard on off his on
There's somebody
high
out
alert.
there hunting at night who slips past everyone and gets out unseen.
Yep. Fortunato had been extra vigilant that night, his hand hovering near his revolver, his eyes scanning the shadows just beyond the iron gates. And somewhere in the distance, a dog barked.
Ah, there it is.
A normal sound, but to Fortunato, it was a signal, a sign that something or someone was moving nearby.
Yep.
He tightened his grip on that flashlight and took a careful step forward. Then he saw it. A figure just beyond the gate. Too still, too patient. The man was dressed in dark clothing, his posture unnaturally calm, as if he belonged there. Fortunato called out, the man in the man, to identify himself. No response. He took a step closer, shining his flashlight towards the intruder, and that's when he saw it. A small red beam flashing across the darkness.
Fuck, man.
The
Rest in
moment
peace.
Fortunato recognized the light, it was already too late. A gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet tore through his chest. He staggered backwards, gasping. His revolver slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the pavement as his knees buckled beneath him. He hit the ground hard. His vision blurred, his lungs burning for air, and above him, the intruder, looming, the red beam flashing once more as if confirming the kill. Then suddenly, as it appeared, the bandit was gone. The only trace of him left behind was a single spent bullet casing, glinting under the pale glow of the nearby street lamp. It would be the next morning when they would discover Jose's body. And once again, more panic. Another murder. Another victim who had tried to stand in the way of the bandit. At this point, the city wasn't just fearful, it was desperate. The wealthy class had once prided themselves on their untouchable status, now lived in constant fear. Their grand estates, once a symbol of power and security, had become hunting grounds for a killer who seemed to just strike at will. The Sao Paulo police, already struggling to contain the chaos, were now under immense pressure to stop the Red Light Bandit before he struck again. The question is, how do you catch a ghost?
You don't.
The bandit left no fingerprints, there was no real witnesses, and no clear pattern. Only death and terror.
Yeah.
One thing was clear. Go ahead.
That's the thing that I was thinking of. Like, there really is no pattern. Like, it seemed like he wanted to target people who were previously seen as, like, unattainable, the rich and whatnot. But then he just sort of killed George inside his house, like, just because he managed to wake up, and now he kills the security guard. So it doesn't seem like he necessarily has a set target. It's just like specific groups of people, and if he comes across somebody, well,
the thing is, he wasn't finished yet.
Of course not.
So as the body count rose, so did the public fear and their fascination. The killer wasn't just another faceless criminal lurking in the night. He was different. He struck without warning, moved like a phantom, he slipped into people's home undetected, and he vanished before anyone could get to him.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just his unpredictability that sent chills through Sao Paulo. It was his signature. A small, piercing red beam, cutting through the darkness, the only warning the victims ever had.
It was barely even a warning, because at that point they were already dead, essentially.
Yes. By the time that you saw it, it was too late. It was this chilling detail that first caught the attention of the media. And at first, reporters scrambled to describe the elusive figure, relying on like fragments of witness accounts and police speculation. But as the crimes escalated, the home invasions, the murders, the eerie red glow, the press needed a name, and they found one, as we've been talking about. They began calling him Bandido da Luz Vermelha, the Red Light Bandit. The name quickly spread through the newspapers, radio broadcast, brought fear to the wealthy, to the public. Everyone was desperate for answers. And like I mentioned, we talked about this also earlier. This moniker wasn't just a reflection of his crime. It was a nod to another criminal legend.
Yeah.
Like I said, a decade earlier, Carl Chessman had gained infamy under the same title. So now Brazil had their own version, and he was still out there roaming free, striking at will, and proving that no one was safe. For nearly a year, Sao Paulo had been held hostage by fear.
Yeah.
The Bandido da Luz Vermelha had become a legend of terror, a name whispered, hushed in conversations, newspaper columns. But with each crime, he became bolder.
Yep.
The killings of John von Christian, a security guard, had sent a clear message. This was no longer a burglar who operated in the shadows. He started with a student, he then went to a bar, and then he moved up to the wealthier folks. He was a killer, and he wasn't afraid to pull that trigger. By mid-1967, authorities had dedicated an entire task force to tracking down this elusive Red Light Bandit.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, the pressure was immense. The elite people were demanding results, and who has power over the cops?
Yeah.
The elite.
The elite.
But there was no clear fingerprints, no known associates, and only a vague description. It seemed that the ghost would never be caught. But there was a single clue.
What?
A stolen car.
Oh.
Abandoned near... Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, stolen. Was it stolen out from, like, Sao Paulo or?
Yeah, so it was abandoned near Paraná, which was nearly 400 kilometers from Sao Paulo. Police cross-reference previous stolen vehicles linked with the Red Light Bandit spree. And when they retraced its origins, it led them to one man. A man who shouldn't have existed. So this man was named Roberto da Silva.
Okay.
On August 8th, 1967, in the city of Curitiba, officers closed in. A small boarding house tucked away in the city streets had become his hideout. A temporary refuge where he likely thought he'd disappear. He wasn't living in Sao Paulo. But the law was catching up. Under the alias of Robert da Silva, his real name was João Acácio Pereira da Costa.
Okay.
He had been living in plain sight, just blending into the ordinary citizens. No more lavish estates to rob, no more grand escapes into the night, just a cheap rented room and the weight of the crimes that made him the most wanted man in Brazil.
Wow.
Maybe he knew his time was running out. Maybe he thought he could escape one more time, but there was nowhere left for him to run.
Yeah.
The police stormed the boarding house in a swift coordinated operation. They catched him completely off guard. As officers forced their way into his room, they found the legend of Sao Paulo's most feared criminal, reduced to nothing more than a desperate man. There was no red beam flashing in the dark, no gunfire breaking the silence. It was just a man surrounded by cops. Yep.
Yeah.
They cuffed him, and they led him out of the building to the streets of Curitiba. They saw the face behind the legend for the very first time. And Sao Paulo, as the news spread, the city let out its breath of relief that they've been holding for almost a year.
Wow.
Now,
They finally got caught.
this man who terrorized the city's elite, who had stolen, killed, he was finally behind bars. But even in captivity, his story is far from over. And I mean far from over.
Really?
The capture of, I'm just going to go call him Zhao for shorter, had been, of course, a triumphant moment for the authorities. For nearly a year, he evaded justice, leaving behind a trail of death, fear, mystery. But now the ghost that haunted the city was no longer lurking in the dark. He was standing in broad daylight, shackled, and waiting for judgment. As the news of his arrest dominated headlines, the people of Sao Paulo demanded justice.
Yes, of course.
They wanted to see the monster punished. No leniency, no mercy. But what the courts decided would ultimately stun the nation.
What? No, I'm okay. What the hell did they do?
The moment that Zhao walked into the interrogation room, the room felt heavy, not just with the presence of a man who had held an entire city hostage, but with the weight of his crimes, stretching across months of terror, broken lives.
Dude, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just like, yeah, like all of this, people wanted to see him punished for it.
And for the investigators and prosecutors, there was no doubt that they had their man. He was born in Santa Catarina State, where he started his robbery life.
Gotcha.
Trying to run away from the Santa Catarina police, he moved to São Paulo State, and that's where he continued his crimes.
So that's what you meant by it. Okay.
But what no one expected was that Zhao Caio wasn't going to fight it.
What?
He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't try to escape his fate. He confessed to everything.
Okay. Weird choice, but...
There's a lot more. Yes, I did. Sitting across from the detectives, his hands shackled, his face devoid of remorse, Zhao Cao spoke with a cold detachment. Not as a man filled with regret, but as someone recounting a list of achievements. Yes, I killed them, he said. His voice even more casual. He detailed the murders with chilling precision, described how he had broken into mansions, how he had crept through the darkness, how he had watched his victims before striking. So we talked about the 4 murders.
Yeah.
But there was also many robberies that he did.
Yeah.
They asked him about 77 robberies.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Yep.
What did he? What was the conclusion? What did he talk about?
He shrugged. It was easy. The rich had everything. I wanted what they had.
So he just essentially confessed to all 77 of those robberies.
Yep. With no hesitation, he walked the investigators through each of his crimes, from the early burglaries to the escalating violence that turned him into a thief, into a killer. He also explained his methods. How he chose his targets. The wealthiest homes, the ones with the weakest security.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah.
How he escalated the walls, slipped past the guard, and enters the homes undetected. How he used the red flashlights sometimes as a tool of fear, sometimes as a warning. And how, when he encountered resistance, he didn't hesitate to pull the trigger.
That's what it seems like.
When they asked him about the murders, he didn't flinch. Walter Burdon, he surprised me. I shot him. Jose Enas de Costa, he was in my way. John Bon Christian, he tried to fight back. I won. Jose Fortunado, the security guard, I warned him. He didn't listen.
Warned him? Okay.
I know.
Just shot him. I don't know.
Each death, each robbery, each moment of terror, he recounted without hesitation, as if he was just replaying a film that he had just seen. The detectives pushed him, expecting some kind of emotion, remorse, regret, even satisfaction. Yeah. He gave them nothing. The most chilling part, when they asked why he did it, why he killed, why he became the terror of Sao Paulo, his answer was simple. He smiled and said, "Because I could."
I mean, at least he's honest about it. At least he's not making himself out to be on a high horse or some savior or
oh yeah,
he's some awesome intelligent genius killer or whatever. He's just because I wanted to.
Because I could.
Because I could.
Yeah. And with those three words, João Acaio Pereira da Costa cemented himself as one of the most terrifying criminals Brazil had ever known. He had confessed to everything, and now he was ready for whatever came next. By the time his trial began, João Cassio had a reputation that grown into something more monstrous. He was no longer just a thief. He was a cold-hearted killer.
Yeah.
The Red Light Bandit. And inside the courtroom... Let's get into this.
Yes.
So...
Inside the courtroom. What happened?
The mysterious shadow was gone. In his place stood a man in a plain prison uniform. He was now just reduced to a suspect trapped under the weight of his crimes. Mm-hmm. The prosecution laid out a staggering scope of his offenses. 4 confirmed murders, 7 attempted homicides,
Whoa.
and 77 robberies.
That's a shit ton of charges.
Oh, yes. Witnesses came forward recounting the horrific nights where their homes had been violated, their loved ones were held at gunpoint, and their presence shattered by the glowing red light. Some were lucky to have escaped with their lives, others were not as fortunate. But as damning as the evidence was, João Cassio didn't fight it.
Okay.
He confessed to everything. He admitted to
All
the
of it,
killings.
yeah.
He admitted to the robberies. And while he was not formally charged with sexual assault, reports suggest that he may have raped over 100 women during his crime spree.
Man.
On May 23rd, 1968, the verdict was handed down. João Cassio was sentenced to, care to guess how long in prison?
200 years.
An astonishing 351 years.
Oh, shit.
You were a little too lenient to the people in Brazil.
I guess I was. Holy shit.
So 351 years, 9 months, and 3 days in prison.
That's literally like 4 lifetimes.
If not
Like
more.
what? If not more, yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So for many, this was just justice served. For the families of the victims, it was a chance to finally sleep in at night, knowing that the man who tormented the city would never be free again.
Mm-hmm. You said for many, though. So
Yeah.
does that mean that some didn't think it was justice?
The thing is, the sense of closure wouldn't last.
Okay.
Because despite the overwhelming sentence, the law of Brazil told a very different story.
What?
So at the time of João Cassio's conviction, the Brazilian law had a maximum prison sentence of 30 years.
No fucking way.
Yes.
Only 30 years?
Yes. So
Dude.
no matter how many crimes a person committed, no matter how high the sentence, the legal system was
30
capped for 30 years. This
Okay.
meant that no matter how much blood was on this man's hand, no matter how many families he destroyed, João Cassio would never serve more than 30 years behind bars. And the public was outraged. How
Yeah,
could a man...
I am
Oh!
outraged.
I mean, yes. When I read this as well, I was like, yeah, 300 years. And I was like, 30? Yeah. So you can imagine how people felt. You know, a man responsible for so much devastation who had been sentenced for over 3.5 centuries in prison was to walk free in 3 decades.
That's crazy.
But the law was clear. And so João Cassio waited. For 30 years, he sat behind bars, watching the world change, knowing that as long as he remained alive, his freedom was inevitable. On August 24th, 1997, the unthinkable happened.
Wow.
The Red Light Bandit walked out of prison a free man.
Wow. Is he still alive?
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay. Okay.
Because the nightmare wasn't quite over.
I mean, he
For
was
30
still
years.
decently, like, young, right? Because he was probably, what, like in his, like, 60s? now?
Yeah, I found his thing of like find a grave. Shoot, I didn't save it. But he was relatively somewhat young.
Okay.
For 30 years, people of Sao Paulo believed that the nightmare was over. The Bandido da Luz Vermelha had been locked away. But the law was clear, no matter how many lives he'd taken, how many homes he violated. Only 30 years. On August 26, 1997, he walked free. The most feared criminal stepped out of prison a free man, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back and the legacy of fear. Now, he didn't return to Sao Paulo. Instead, he traveled south, back to Joinville, a city where he was born, as if he was trying to erase his past and start again. But a man like this could never really disappear. He was instantly recognizable. His face was plastered across newspapers and television reports for decades. The people of Brazil hadn't forgotten him. The moment he stepped back into the world, he became a spectacle. And something about him had changed.
That's kind of ominous.
Perhaps it was prison. Maybe it was the weight of his own infamy. Or perhaps he reveled in the legacy that he created. Because now, Joe Acacio refused to wear anything that wasn't red.
Oh, he really took on the Red Light Bandit. Wow, he made that his identity.
Red shirts, red pants, red jacket, red shoes. He embraced it. He embraced the legacy that he had created or that created for him.
He was a walking stop sign.
People whispered that he had become obsessed with the color, that he was wearing his crimes like a badge of honor, a walking reminder that no justice could truly erase the past. But the strangest part is that the attention didn't seem to bother him. If anything, he loved it. People would approach him out of curiosity, out of morbid fascination, out of the desire to say that they met the Red Light Bandit, and ask him for an autograph.
Dude.
So this is I don't know what this man was thinking, but instead of signing his name, he simply scribbled one word across the page.
Red.
Autógrafo.
Oh.
Yeah.
Signature.
Autograph. Yep. No signature, no message, just signature. I have a picture of it, so I'll definitely be sending you that as well.
Yes, please.
Just a cold, impersonal acknowledgement. A man who knew exactly what he was, what he had done, and how he still cast a shadow over Brazil. For some, of course, it was a disturbing act of arrogance, and for others, it was proof that he had never really changed. Now, Joinville didn't welcome him at all. Most people didn't want anything to do with him. They avoided him on the streets, crossing the road when they saw him coming. How can you miss a man walking in all red? He had been a myth for so long, a faceless figure, but now he was real, he was alive, and he was right there walking among them.
Honestly, I wonder if that must have been more satisfying to him than the actual killings themselves.
Do you think
Right?
he knew that he would not get sentenced more than 30 years, and that's why he's like, might as well get caught?
Potentially. But, like, even so, like, Maybe, yeah. Like, he lets everybody know of all of his crimes. He only gets 30 years, so he knows he's going to be back out in society.
And he knows he can't be retrialed over something else because they're like, you
Exactly.
trialed me over all those things
Yes.
already.
And it's like, maybe
Convicted
he doesn't need to like commit any more crimes because he still just terrorizes the community by simply existing,
Yeah.
by being about. And I wonder if that's like just as satisfying, like knowing that your literal existence is causing people so much like fear and
Oh, yeah.
making them
I'm sure he
uncomfortable.
got like a high out of it.
Yeah.
For the first time in 3 decades, the Red Light Bandit wasn't behind bars. The question that you had earlier is, how long would he remain free? For 30 years, João Cassio da Costa had been locked away. But in 4 months since his release, he had become something else entirely. A relic of crime, curiosity, a spectacle. People watch him like a ticking bomb. Like, would he do something else again, or was he done and he just reveled in this? Those who had lived through his reign of terror watched him with a mix of fascination and unease. Like I said, he wore red from head to toe. He signed autographs with the word autógrafo. And he made his presence known wherever he went. And then one night, it all came to an end. It was January 5th, 1998. Just a few days into the new year. In Joinville, João Cassio found himself where he had often in the past, inside a bar, surrounded by people, drinks. The details of what triggered the altercation remain unclear, but one thing was certain. He was not a man who knew how to back down. According to the reports, an argument broke out between João Cassio and another man, a local resident whose brother had allegedly been threatened by the ex-convict. Some say João Cassio made an inappropriate comment. Others claim that he was already on the edge, carrying the kind of tension that came with being a man who refused to be forgotten. What is known is this. The argument escalated, voices were raised, and a knife appeared in João Cassio's hand. In a flash, the bar, once buzzing with casual conversation and laughter, became a site of violence. The moment the blade was branded, the figure turned into something else entirely. The other man, fearing for his own life and his brother's, acted first. Before João Cassio could strike, before he could make a move, the sound of a single gunshot cracked through the air.
Ooh. How the turntables.
Yes. A sharp, violent end to a man who had lived by the gun most of his life would be ended by the gun.
By the gun.
The bullet hit its mark. João Cassio staggered, his infamous red clothing darkening with blood. For a moment, the bar fell silent, and then with one final, unceremonious collapse, the Red Light Bandit was gone. Oh, yeah. The news of his death spread quickly, but it didn't send shockwaves through Brazil like his crimes did.
Oh, yeah. They're like,
To
"Oh, he's
many,
dead?"
to many, he was already dead.
Yeah.
His story had ended the way that his story ended the day he was arrested in 1967. He was just a ghost of himself, many people said. His killer that night was taken into custody, but the case never reached the level of the public outrage that might have been expected for the murder of a former criminal. The man claimed self-defense, stating that João Cassio had posed an imminent threat. And in November 2004, after years of legal proceedings, the Joinville court ruled in favor of the killer, determining that the shot was justified.
Good.
The case was closed. The last page of the Red Light Bandit story had been written. There was no funeral, no mourning. Public didn't care. He died the way he had lived, in violence and confrontation, and in the shadows of a life shaped by crimes. The man who terrorized Sao Paulo for so long was gone.
He disappeared quickly, just like he had always done before.
Exactly. Some criminals become nothing more than whispers in their dark, but others become legends. And his is a story that would live on even after his death, because in 1968, the world saw a new version of the Red Light Bandit.
No way.
Not in a police lineup, not in prison, but in the silver screen.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So, director Rogerio Sangesla, he was 22 years old at the time. He turned Sao Paulo's most feared criminal into an artistic masterpiece. The film is called O Bandido da Luz Vermelha, The Red Light Bandit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a crime thriller. It was loud, fast, unpredictable. It was a mockery of the media. It was a critique of Brazil itself, where poverty and corruption could create a man like João Cao. And in many ways, it was surreal, more surreal than the truth. Unlike traditional true crime film, this wasn't a documentary. This followed a character named George, who was a burglar, much like the real João Acasio, who terrorized the elite people of Sao Paulo. But instead of a straightforward retelling, the film just jumped through time in mixed styles. It blurred the line between reality and fiction. Critics and audiences didn't know what to make of it. But one thing was clear, it was unforgettable. And in 2010, The Bandit returned with a sequel.
In 2010?
Yes!
So, what? Okay.
Now, I tried watching it, but I could only find it in Portuguese, and I was like,
fair. Yeah.
I'll have to find somewhere that has subtitles. And that, my friends, is the story of João Casio, the Bandido de la Luz Vermelha, the man who terrorized Sao Paulo, captivated the media, and became a legend, both in crime and film history. A thief turned to killer, a prison turned celebrity, and ultimately, a man who met his end the same way that he lived, through violence and chaos. And I know what you're thinking. Jay, that was wild. But what about ghosts? Well, lucky for you, Kai is up next.
What a segue. What a segue into the paranormal case. Thank you for the Red Light Bandit 2.0, number 2.
Yeah. So, Kai,
wow.
take it away. And try not to scare me too much, unless you're planning to keep me up all night. But, yeah, what did you think of the Red Light Bandit?
Oh, that was a good case. Honestly, I think that was fun. I mean, it would have been scary as hell to be living in Sao Paulo, right?
Oh, of course.
The craziest part is that he only got 30 years, right? Because of the law.
Yeah. At the time, I don't know now if that's changed, but at the time, the maximum they could sentence someone was 30 years, and that's what he got.
I think Brazil in general, like nowadays, is much more like hardcore on crime.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't know.
I
could be talking out my ass.
I mean, I'm sure people were probably outraged that he only got 30 years, and I'm sure at some point something else happened where people were like, they need more time, and something was done about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I felt like that moment was like I could see him smirking when they're like, oh, he's only going to get 30 years out of 300.
Same. Like, he's just sitting back casually. He's like 30 years?
Like, I'll make it out.
Yeah, that's going to go by quick.
Yeah.
So. Wow. All right, well, time for some spooks.
Yeah, whatever your time for Kai.
Yeah. All right. Well, my case, it takes us to 2001 in Union, Missouri, here in the United States.
Okay.
So, The LaChance family had been through a lot. Life was tough the past couple of years. Living situation wasn't great, being crammed into a small apartment with the father, Stephen, and his 3 kids. And they finally found a house in Union, Missouri. It was nice. It was a great deal. It felt like a fresh start. A place to heal, to rebuild from what they had been struggling with. It seemed perfect at first. Quiet, peaceful. It was honestly surprising. You know, they were kind of flabbergasted with this new house that they had managed to find just in the nick of time.
Okay.
Peace. But peace didn't last long.
It never does.
Mm-mm.
We
But
just talked about it too.
Mm-hmm. It never does. And much like the Red Light Bandit, it happened quick. For the LaChance family, it started almost instantly. As soon as
What
they moved.
started instantly?
Strange creaks, cold chill in the air. You know, things you could chalk up to just being an old house. But then came the screams.
I'm assuming not from
Loud.
people, not from the family members.
Unexplainable. The kind that made you want to run out of the house.
Got
And
it.
that's exactly what the LaChance family did. But it wasn't just the screams, it was so much that happened. The house rumbling, the constant shadows, people moving
Rumbling?
about.
Is this Monster House?
Kind of. All of these things that made the LaChance family feel trapped. You know, it felt more like a prison than like a sanctuary like they had hoped it would be. They were desperate for refuge, and they very quickly realized that their new dream home was a nightmare.
Oof. No. And they thought it was just a dream home in the nick of time.
Yeah. But isn't that like how a lot of like haunted house
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
start? Like
It's
this
either
family
that.
moves and they're so excited about this new place. They found a great deal on the house, which is a red flag in itself.
It's like, why is it so cheap?
Exactly.
But also, like, if it's cheap, I'll take it too.
No, seriously, it's like, oh, nothing's wrong with it. It's just an old house for a good deal, and I'm about to get kicked out of my apartment. Yeah, I'm gonna buy it.
The last owner has died in here? Cool, they're not buried here, are they?
Yeah,
No, great.
No.
Yeah.
No. Mm-mm.
In this economy, I'll take it.
So, the LaChance family. They were living in Missouri. It was Father Stephen along with his 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter.
Okay.
He was a single father. A couple years prior to this, in 2001, his wife divorced him. In some readings, I've seen that his wife died. I don't think she died. I don't know where. I think they got divorced.
Lots of mixed
Like,
information.
they separated. Yeah.
Okay.
So Stephen was a single father living with his kids. He was just a simple like worker, but his lease was running out. It was May 8th, I believe. Yeah, and so their lease was running out. So Stephen was desperate to find anywhere that he could move his family into. And he found this great listing. It was a house in Union, Missouri. He took a tour with the sales lady, and it seemed great. It was like this big open space, sort of just like a normal white country house type of thing, like a countryside house in Missouri.
Do you know how many bedrooms?
3 bedrooms.
Okay.
It's a
Bathrooms?
3-bedroom house.
I'm just
Probably
asking you,
2
like, if you're like the
bathrooms.
real estate agent, you don't have to give me that information if you don't have
Welcome. But that's
If you
kind
look
of the
to your
thing,
left.
though. You know, you would think that the real estate agent would be like really like invested in selling the house.
it. Oh, were they not?
No. Stephen described this sales lady as actually kind of weird, very strange. oddly uninterested. It almost like seemed like she wasn't even trying to really show off the house.
Like she's just going through the motions.
Yeah, it was. He said she treated it more like a museum rather than a home, pointing things out, making their way on through. But
That's an interesting way to do that.
Yeah, but it didn't bother him because all he saw was a nice house. He sent in the offer. He knew it was going to be competitive. He saw other families taking the tour.
Oh.
So a few days go by, and he gets a call. The landlady has chosen his family to live in the house. He's so excited. So, he's getting ready to meet her inside of the house, to sign all the paperwork, fill out all of the forms. But Stephen gets kind of disappointed.
Why?
Because the sales lady wants to meet at a restaurant. She,
for
some
what?
reason, wants to avoid being in the house. But, he
Oh,
brushes
like,
it
I'll
away.
give you a tour of the house, but, like, we can't meet here anymore?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
weird.
sort of
That
thing.
is weird.
Right? Anyway, Stephen and his 3 kids, they move in. May 8th, 2001. They're so excited. So
Was
they
it
go
a
inside. Go ahead.
One-story house?
It was 1 story. No,
Okay.
it was 2 story. Sorry.
Okay.
It was a 2-story house. Yeah. 2-story, 3-bedroom home. It was nice, kitchen area, family room. One of the things, there was lots of open space to hang up pictures. And so
Okay.
that's exactly what Stephen
They-
and his family did.
Fair.
It was a picture of Jesus, I believe, that they tried hanging up.
Do you
like-
believe it's a picture of Jesus, or do you just...
I don't believe. No, I'm kidding.
I don't believe that's a picture of that man. I think that, yeah.
Who even is Jesus? Like, what does he look like? I don't know.
Yeah. It's like he's too white in that picture. This man was a Jew. He was in the sun all day. He was a little darker.
Exactly. Sorry, no, it was a picture of 2 angels, not Jesus. But same thing. Same thing. Same thing.
Okay. You know what? I like to imagine that somewhere in that house they did have a picture of Jesus. So you're not too far off.
They probably did. And that's really when things started. They had barely even finished unpacking. They just started hanging up pictures on the walls. This picture of these angels.
Okay. It was right after they hung up the angels.
Yeah, because that picture did not want to stay on the wall.
Oh.
Stephen had to hang it up 3 different times because each time he would turn around and it would crash onto the ground, sliding over into him.
What?
So it seemed small. It was things like weird things like that. The small, subtle signs that something was off about the house.
Yeah, I'd be very curious about that as well.
Right? You're like,
I'd be like
what's going
looking
on?
at whatever I'm hanging it on, and then looking at the picture, and I'm like,
Yeah.
can
But,
I?
but
can
it's
you
this weird old house. I got it for a good deal. I'm just going to overlook all of this. It doesn't
No, like
matter.
I
We're
wouldn't even
fine.
think it's the house. I would think it's either something with a frame or something with like the nail or the hook.
It just keeps falling out, right?
Yeah, I
something
wouldn't
like
even
that.
think it's the house.
Yeah. And that's when things became more prominent. The kids constantly reporting how cold it would get into the house. The temperature changes, and all of a sudden it would get warm all over again. The times when the kids started hearing noises, and for a time, the kids didn't want to sleep in their own bedrooms. They all slept
Okay.
with their dad, Stephen, in the same room. And
Okay, how many
he got
kids were there?
annoyed Eventually, 3.
Okay.
3 kids. And so they were trying to live their life. They pushed past the warnings that things were awry, things weren't good, like the neighbors avoiding the house as they were walking by the street, literally crossing over to the other side.
Oh.
Like
So it's
the-
like little things that you would notice, like, hey, honey, have you ever noticed that like the neighbors cross the street to walk not on this? Yeah.
That's
Huh.
weird, but whatever.
Yeah. So once again, little
Yeah.
things.
Or like the time when a neighbor drove by and kind of suspiciously said, "Oh, I hope you guys get along well here at this house."
That's yeah. That's
Or
a
the
weird way to put it.
time when the kids and their dad, Steven, were in the kitchen just having conversation, and all of a sudden Steven sees a black figure of a man standing in the doorway of their family room, just watching.
A shadow figure.
A shadow figure, but something maybe a little more formed than that. This
Okay.
figure, it moves into the room. Steven moves over to check, and it's still there, watching.
Oh.
And it starts to come closer.
No, stop
Starts to
it.
come
Get out.
closer, and Steven, he is the good dad that he's going to be, and he gets his kids out of the house.
Good.
And as soon as they open up that door, they hear a loud, guttural scream coming from inside of the house.
Was it his wife?
No, his wife wasn't there. He was a single father, living there at the house. And this was a man's scream.
Okay.
So it definitely was not. They get the hell out of the house. They leave for days. They stay at Steven's mom's place, uneasy, scared to even make their way back into this house.
How do you even explain that to your parents?
I have no clue.
It's like, hey, Mom, I brought your grandkids because there's a shadow figure in the house.
Yeah. Things subside for a little bit because they're away. They don't have to deal with it. Steven battling with the decision of going back to the house or leaving, but no, he can't
He
afford
bought
to
this
leave.
house. Yeah.
He can't.
You can't. It's a huge down payment and everything
Exactly.
else.
He
And
gave everything he had to get this place. So they go back. And things just start to get worse. And I could talk about them myself, but I think I'd like to read a direct recount from Steven himself.
I think we'd be like,
this
I'd
whole
like to show you.
situation.
Pulls up the CCTV or something.
There's actually a lot of interviews from Steven.
I am all ears.
Is something that he wrote. It's a little long, not too long, but I like to read this. This was posted in 2004 by Stephen Lechamp. Do you believe in ghosts? I used to be like many of you. I was a true skeptic, a true disbeliever. That was me until 3 years ago. Now I do believe. I wish I didn't. It would be easier for me to sleep at night. Even now, 3 years later, I am still waking up in the night by the memory of the screaming man, the child in pain, and the dark, ghostly image that turned my world upside down. And changed my beliefs forever. I do believe in ghosts. It was in May 2001. I needed desperately to find a place for myself and 3 children to live in Union, Missouri. Our lease was up at the apartment where we had lived for 2 years. I was a single father and about to find myself and my children homeless. Like many, I had answered just about every ad in the newspaper for rentals. One evening, I received a call from this woman telling me about this house. She said it was a rather large, old house in perfect shape. She invited me to an open house that was to be held that coming Sunday. Sunday rolled around. You can't imagine the surprise when my daughter and I rolled up in front of this large white house. We walked in. The smell of baking cookies hit us immediately upon entering through the front door. To our surprise, we were standing in a living room with cherubs surrounding the top of the walls around the room. The original woodwork was intact, and a large wooden pole ran to the ceiling, creating a divider separating the living room from the family room. The house had 2 floors with 3 bedrooms, and a large family kitchen with a mudroom that led to the back door. The upstairs bedrooms had a breezeway that could be accessed from all rooms. The basement had an old butcher's shower and a fruit cellar. It was more house than we ever imagined for the price, and we immediately decided we had to have it. Anyone who has lived in an apartment for 2 years with 3 children would understand our desperation. We had to have this house. We spoke with the landlady, and she gave me an application to fill out. Many people were there looking at the house, so we knew we would have to compete to be its tenants. I handed my application to the landlady. Quote, "You understand the responsibility of living in an old house like this?" she asked. "Oh yes, I understand. It's beautiful," I quickly replied, not understanding what I agreed to. Well then, I will get back to you, she quickly retorted, and was off to peddle her wares to another of the visiting house hunters. She was a strange old lady, and the way she showed the house wasn't in a real estate type manner. She showed the house as if she were showing a museum. We felt like we were on one of those house tours often given each year for charity. A week went by before the phone rang one evening. The strange landlady was overly excited to tell me that she had selected me, my daughter, and 2 sons to live in the old house. I was to meet her that following day at a restaurant to settle all of the paperwork and payment. I thought this was a little strange, and I was a little disappointed because I couldn't wait to see the house that would now become our home. The papers were signed on the following day. That weekend was Memorial Weekend, and we were all set to move in. It seemed like years before Friday came that week, but we were finally there. Moving day. The move was typical, and before we knew it, our belongings were safely hidden inside the old white house. I was removing the last few items from the moving truck when a car slowed down, almost stopping in front of our new home. From the window of the slow-moving car, the passenger said, "Hope you get along okay here," and then sped up and drove away. "What do you think of that?" my puzzled daughter asked. "Friendly neighbors, I suppose," I replied as I shut the sliding door to the truck. The first night in the house went by without fanfare, maybe because we were so tired from the move, or perhaps because the house wanted to draw us in a little closer before beginning its series of attacks and assaults upon me and my family. The next morning started like most any other day, except I did notice one strange thing about the house. Each of the house's interior doors had an old-fashioned hook and eye latch, but not on the inside of each room's doors to keep someone out. The latches were on the outside of the room's doors, as if to keep something in.
Oh.
"What is it, Dad?" my youngest son asked me from behind. "Oh, nothing," I replied, and unpacked our things. The first instance happened in the living room when I was hanging a large picture of 2 angels. The daughter thought that this would complement the cherubs that surrounded the room. I hung the picture and turned to walk away. Crash! I turned to see that picture had fallen to the floor. Rehanging the picture once again, I turned away. Crash! The picture was once again on the floor. Hanging it for a 3rd time, I felt a rush of air when I started walking away, and something hit the back of my ankles. What the hell? I turned to see the picture lying at my feet. More determined than ever, I hung the picture again and stated loudly, "Stay there, damn it!" I had to laugh because I was alone. Who did I think I was talking to? The kids were playing on the front porch. "Dad, come see this." My daughter's voice rang through the front door. I stepped out onto the porch. "Sit down and watch this," she said excitedly. "Watch what?" I replied. No sooner were the words out of my mouth when my daughter pointed to an old man walking down the sidewalk to our house. However, when he reached our property line, he quickly crossed the street and walked on the opposite sidewalk. "They don't like walking in front of our house, Dad. Isn't that weird?" My daughter, breathless with excitement, stated. And right she was. I sat on that porch for 3 hours, watching our neighbors across the street from our house whenever they walked along our street. A couple of times I mentioned as if to say hello, but they just dropped their heads and continued at a brisker pace. Maybe they are uncomfortable with new neighbors, I rationalized, trying to make sense of the senseless situation. We went inside for dinner, and the rest of the night went usually without incident. Sunday. The kids came home from church excited because we had set aside the day to work on our yard. This was a big deal for us because the only outside area our apartment provided was a front balcony. We mowed the grass and cleaned the leaves from under the porch and in the front yard. Strangely enough, the trees seemed to be shedding their leaves as if it were fall. Strange tree behavior, I thought, and I made a mental note to mention it to the landlady when I talked to her next. I asked my youngest son to go inside and bring out the garden hose from the basement so we could clean off the walkways and wash down the weathered white of the house. A few moments passed when I heard him screaming from inside the house. Running frantically into the house, I found him standing in the kitchen, shaking the middle of a puddle of urine. "What's wrong?"
No.
"What happened?" Looking at me with scared eyes of a child, he said, "Something chased me up the basement steps." "What chased you?" I asked, already thinking the overactive imagination of a little boy was at play here. "I don't know, Daddy, but it was big." My 2 other children and I checked the basement but found nothing except the garden hose that had been dropped during his frightened escape. "Let's get you cleaned up," I said. Naturally, there was a teasing from my other 2 children about the proverbial basement monster. "Better watch out when you go into the basement because..." The glare of my eye finished my middle boy's sentence. The rest of Sunday and Monday went without any other incidents, and we were so happy those first few days in the house. My daughter was making plans about gardens and decorating, and my boys thought walking to their baseball games would be easy because the park was very close. It was a normal, happy time, which unfortunately did not last long. Monday came, the last week of school for my kids and a long week of work for me. Each day we would leave the house and return each evening to find every light in the house turned on. I blamed the children for leaving the lights on in the morning. However, my daughter and I sent the boys to the car on Friday while we toured the house, ensuring every light was off. The night we returned home to find again every light burning. When I walked into the house, I was a little shaken. There was no logical reason for all the lights to be on other than someone in our house. Searching the house in a panic, I found nothing. "Daddy, it's cold in here," my daughter stated from the living room. What was she talking about? Sweat was pouring down my back and across my brow. However, the temperature dropped 30 degrees when I stepped into the living room. This was the first time I felt its presence.
That's a lot.
Yeah. 30 degrees is a lot, yeah. I can't describe it any better. It felt like an electrical current running through my body, bringing tears to my eyes and bumps to my arms. It passed quickly. I remember thinking, what the hell was that? Soon, my daughter stated, "Daddy, it's getting warm in here." Sure enough, the temperature was rising as I watched the thermostat climb. That night, my children slept with me, what little sleep I got. Sunday night, we were sitting in the living room talking. I was getting ready to take a trip the following morning to Indianapolis for work, and we were discussing their plans for a stay at Grandma's. The kids had their backs to the living room, for which I am still thankful because the memory of what happened next still haunts my dreams. I noticed it first out of the corner of my eye. A quick glance. Standing at the kitchen doorway leading into the family room, something was moving. Not something, someone. I looked toward it again. It was a dark figure of a man, even though there was full light. He was solid in form, except there was a moving, churning, dark gray, black smoke or mist that made up his form. I looked down because I was sure I wasn't seeing this and what my eyes were playing tricks on me. 1 or 2 good rationalizations and we could go on with our lives without incident. A few moments passed, and I was sure it would be gone when I looked up again. But he was still there, and he began to move. Moving into the family room and pausing in the center, his form was still a churning mass, turning blackness. He stood there for what seemed an eternity, but it was only a few minutes before he melted into the air. Gone. I remember the thoughts that were racing through my head. I have 2 choices. We could run out of the house screaming into the night like those crazies you always see in the movies. You know, the ones that are always based on fact. Or, the other choice, we could get up quietly, leave the house, and figure all of this out. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. That's what we'll do. We'll go quietly, orderly, as if nothing was wrong. Standing on shaky legs, I said in my calmest daddy voice, "Let's go get a soda and see Grandma." My youngest was instantly excited at the prospect of a soda before bed, and the older 2 looked at me as if I lost my mind. "Come on, guys, it'll be fun." Thank God, my car keys were on the coffee table before us. We moved orderly out of the front door, and I turned to lock the door when a loud, painful scream of a man came from inside the house. It sounded as if he was screaming in pain, so loud that it could be heard throughout the neighborhood, and the dogs began to bark. "To hell with orderly. Get in the car," I screamed at my children.
Yeah.
At a dead run, we headed to the car and then to drive to my mom's house, which is still a blur to this day. I panicked, knowing we had to escape the old White House. But before we were away from the neighborhood, my youngest son, in a terrified voice, said, "Daddy, the basement monster is standing in the upstairs window."
No.
I looked back, and sure enough, the black form stood in the window, watching us leave. That night, we stayed at my parents' house. I gathered my things early the next day and left for my business trip. I had a whole week of rationalizations when I returned home to pick up my children. Where else were we to go? I had put everything I had saved and then some into the move. We had no choice but to return to the big old White House. Besides, after a week of talking myself out of the events of that night, I was ready to return. So, on Friday night, we returned to the house. The weekend went by without incident, though we got very little sleep. I was taking another extended weekend to make up for my kids for my week away. On Saturday, we explored the big shed at the back of the yard, and in it, we found several personal belongings that appeared to belong to different people. My parents convinced me that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to call the strange old landlady and ask her some straightforward questions about the house. It was to be one of the most awkward and strangest phone calls of my life. Once I could reach her, I carefully chose my words and asked in a normal voice if any of the previous tenants had ever mentioned a ghost. Well, of course, she said at first that she could not remember. However, she said that one female tenant had claimed that her dead father had come to visit her, but the old woman always thought she was crazy. The landlady said that the girl had left behind some of the stuff in the shed, but she couldn't get her to come pick it up. The other stuff in the shed evidently belonged to a man who had lived there, but left in the middle of the night, leaving behind his thing. But no, she had never heard of anyone talking about the house being haunted. I asked her how long ago did these people live there, and she said, much more than a year, honey. Why do you ask? The phone call wasn't of much help, and it didn't calm my fears much, but what else could I do? The rest of the long weekend came and went. I had convinced myself that it was just a one-time ordeal because nothing more was happening. That was until Monday night. I was on the phone with my mom. The kids were off playing in my bedroom, which was located on the first floor. While on the phone, I began to hear the inside doors rattling. Listening closely, they rattled again, and I yelled at the kids to quit playing games. I told my mom everything was okay, just the kids playing tricks. They rattled again, this time harder. So this time louder, I scolded the children to behave and stop playing tricks. They rattled again. At this time, they rattled louder, but before I could scold, my daughter's scared voice cut me off. Daddy, I'm in here reading, and my brothers are asleep.
No.
Now I will try to recreate what happens next to the best of my memory. Some of it I remember clearly. Other parts are a blur to this day. Just as soon as I heard my daughter, the temperature in the house instantly dropped a good 30 degrees. With it came the feeling of an electrical charge running through my body. Its energy and a horrible stench that I cannot describe permeated the room. And then the screaming started.
No.
Softly at first, but building momentum. I yelled through the phone to my mother to help. We were getting out. Then the whole house began to shake and come alive. From the above, I could hear something large coming down the stairs. Boom, boom, boom. The screaming of the man over and over. The screaming of my daughter. Daddy, what is happening?
Grab your kids and go.
Along with this came the thought that one of my 2 bedroom doors connected to the stairs. Boom, boom. It was coming down those stairs. I had to get to my children. The whole house was alive with noise. The floor beneath me was shaking as I approached the bedroom door. I felt something behind me, and I knew I didn't want to turn around to see it. Boom, screaming. A new scream mixed into the man's scream, this one from a child. Boom, screams, boom. I made it to my bedroom door, but it wouldn't open. By this time, I, too, am screaming. Throwing myself against the door, it still wouldn't budge. I repeatedly threw myself against the door until it finally slammed open. My daughter was in shock at this point. I instructed my middle son to grab his brother, ran out the front door, and head for the car. Boom, boom, screams. My daughter won't move, and I finally had to slap her to bring her to life. Finally responding,
Slap her?
Yeah. Finally responding, I grab her and head for the door as I hear the other bedroom door slam open behind us. It was on our trail, and I knew I couldn't let it reach us. The whole house was still shaking and alive with noise and something big on our heels. When we reached the front door and out onto the porch, I slammed the front door behind us. As we got into the car, we could still hear the noise from the house. I drove away and parked at the top of the street where I could still see the house and wait for my parents to arrive. We could see it searching through the house. Searching for us. Its blackness moving from room to room methodically.
No.
That was our last night in the house. My children never returned. I never went alone when I returned to get a few of our things on several occasions. Everyone I brought into that house with me would also witness something happen. A scream, whispers, pounding from the floor above. It was not selective anymore at who let it let hear its fury. I remember what the old lady said as I turned over the key. Standing there, the whole side of my arm and torso still bruised from throwing myself against that bedroom door. She said, "Some people are meant to live in an old house like that, and some people aren't. I never thought you were the old house type." And I guess she was right. About a month after moving out of the old house, a friend sent me a website address she wanted me desperately to see. Put John T. Crow, Union, Missouri, into your search engine, she said. When I did, the face of a man came onto my screen. The same face that showed up in a picture my brother took in the fruit cellar one afternoon while I was packing for the move. The man was famous. The land is famous, dating back to the Civil War. About a year ago, someone I know saw a police car race up to that house one night and witnessed a family running out of its front door in their night clothes. As for the house today, the old lady turned it into a dog kennel this past fall. I guess she ran out of people that could live in an old white house like that. You see, I do believe in ghosts. I still drive past that house occasionally, and when I get enough nerve, I look up at the upstairs window, and it's there, watching, waiting, angry. Sometimes its screams still wake me from my sleep. Its infectious scream creeping into my dreams, turning them into nightmares. I still don't sleep very well. In my dreams, I see a faceless man standing in that basement, washing away blood from his naked, blood-covered body, grunting, panting, breathing. The breathing you'd hear when you were alone with it in a room. The breathing you would hear when you knew it was there. Heavy, labored breathing. Yes, I do believe in ghosts. I do believe in ghosts. And maybe you should too. And that is what Stephen LeChance firsthand has to say about his experiences
What's
living in that house.
interesting is that this is like a first account record from the person that
Yeah.
lived in the house.
Yeah.
I feel like normally like it gets like what's the word?
Like,
Yes.
I know what you mean. Like, yeah, it's sensationalized.
Like TV shows and like
yes,
writers.
like and it's retold by like
Yeah.
different people.
And like it's over dramatic, but like this is just
Yeah.
what he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a point in this that he mentioned, a man named John T. Crow.
Mm-hmm.
And he said how it was the same face that showed up in a picture his brother took. Well, yeah, doing a little bit of research into the history of the land itself, the Union House was found to have actually been built upon land that was owned by John T. Crow.
Okay.
He was a captain in the Civil War. So he was actually the captain of the Missouri militia in the Civil War. And so he lived on there with his wife until after she passed away. Apparently, the actual house itself was built on like the slave quarters of the property.
Oh.
But it's not. Of course, John, the captain, he never actually admitted he owned slaves. But
So it's not documented, but it's what people say.
yeah.
Okay.
And so something else people say is that John's wife, Minerva, was actually messing around with at least one of the male slaves.
Oh. I thought you were gonna be like messing around with black magic, and it's like, oh no, like she was messing around with one of the slaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And apparently that led to, I guess, John killing the slaves. And so there's been talk of there is alleged like lots of death and
surrounding
bad
the property
energy
and the land.
surrounding that property.
Okay.
Yeah. So the house itself, yeah. So it has some sort of bloody history in a way, right? Like a lot of that land in that area of Missouri is sort of connected to the Civil War. And actually, just a few blocks down in the neighborhood, there's actually a cemetery.
Oh, I thought you were gonna be like, there's another haunting.
That'd be kind of cool. Some other accounts say that the house across the street, apparently there was an axe murder in the house.
Wow.
So just adding on to these like recounts, these tellings of death that surround the property.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with all of that background info, with all of the direct first-hand recounts from Stephen LeChance, it seems like there is so much evidence really pushing the fact that this was a haunted house.
Yeah.
Right? You know, he he brought in investigators, like I mentioned. Stephen himself turned into a paranormal investigator because he was just ignited with this sort of draw to investigate the unknown.
Oh, okay.
afterwards.
So, like,
so
that's
he-
what he did afterwards?
Yeah, that's pretty much what he did. He spent
That's
his
pretty
time being
cool.
like a paranormal investigator, which is kind of cool. Yeah. But then I started looking at more info, looking at more interviews and more interviews.
Okay.
Because Stephen has so many interviews.
The
out
thing
there.
is, this was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, I would imagine there's a lot of interviews, like people could
Yeah.
actually record
Yeah.
conversations with this man.
100%. So there's
Okay.
a lot of interviews out there on YouTube, other articles, and actually, Stephen wrote an entire book about his experiences living in that house. And it got me thinking. After watching these interviews, a multitude of them, he pretty much says the exact same thing in every one, which isn't
Okay.
alarming at first, but it almost feels like it's kind
Rehearsed?
of memorized. It's rehearsed.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's up with that? Like,
The
I
thing
get that your
is-
story's not going to change,
Yeah.
but also... Go ahead, yeah.
I get that, but I don't know. My mind goes in multiple places. I see where you're coming from. It's like, hey, it sounds almost like it's rehearsed because it's always the same story. There's no deviation. There's no... It's always the same points that you bring up. But I'm also thinking the things that we remember from childhood are the traumatic things
That's true.
because we remember them in detail years after because they were traumatic. Not
true.
saying that, like he was traumatized to that extent, but I think we tend to hold bad memories with, I don't know, better memory with better detail.
I get what you're saying. So, like, the reason he focuses so much on the specific things is because that's the worst of it. Like,
Yeah.
that's what he really paid attention to, I guess,
Mhm.
in a way. I guess that makes sense.
I see both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the cynical, like, skeptical side of me is like, oh, well, he saw this as an opportunity, right? You know,
Yeah.
he got his popularity, his notoriety
Okay,
by getting
question.
all these interviews, by writing this book.
When did this haunt take place?
May 2001.
Okay, and do you know when the book was released, published?
It's called The Uninvited. The Uninvited. Let's see. Published in 2008.
Okay, so
7
it
years
wasn't.
after.
Yeah, it wasn't right off the bat.
No.
Okay.
That's true. So there was some time. I don't know. It just it like doesn't almost sit right with me. Like I
Yeah.
don't mean to diminish.
No, I
but-
get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. But another thing that really is crazy to me is that he had 3 children
Yeah.
that also lived through this haunted house.
Are any of the children interviewed?
He has a mom who was told all about this. Apparently the mom was on the phone while the big rumble, the big climax of the haunting happened.
Ah.
But there's nothing. There's no interviews that I could find of the children, of
Yeah.
the mom.
Like, no,
Nothing.
nothing with the kids. How old were they at the time?
He never specifies.
Got it.
They're
Okay.
just young children.
I'm just
picture
trying to
them
figure
all
out-
like young, probably
Yeah.
like 12 and under.
I'm just trying to figure out. Yeah, maybe they didn't speak to like the media because they were like underage. They were too little.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, if they spoke out now, I'm sure they're like
Yeah.
of legal age. But at the same time,
Yeah.
why haven't they spoken out?
I think the most recent interview that I watched him do was February 2023, 2 years ago.
Oh wow.
So even 22 years later, he's still doing interviews about
Okay,
it.
but he's like a full-blown investigator, right?
At this point in time, I don't think he is anymore.
Okay, but he
like,
did-
really
okay.
dove into it for a while.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I want to know if he's getting paid for the interviews or if he's just talking about it to talk about it.
I don't know. A lot of them are just like on YouTube or
Okay.
There's a couple that have been on some like sort of like media stations, but I
Mhm.
doubt he's really getting paid.
Okay, so I think it might just be I to talk about the experience or because of the exposure for the book, but the book came out 8 years later, so
That's true. But
How-
speaking of, go ahead.
how did you come across this story? Because I've never heard of this case.
Well, I was looking through, as I do. I was like page upon page upon page of like paranormal stories of
Okay.
like houses or buildings that aren't quite normal. I
Uh-huh.
try to look up hauntings of people.
Got it.
Like I try to find specific names sometimes, and Stephen
Mhm.
LaChance is a name that popped up.
Got it.
in The haunting of his house. Yeah. So I was like, I couldn't find anything of the kids or whatever. So that sort of brings my expectations down a little bit.
Yeah.
But, the media really tacked on. It gained a lot of popularity. Like I've mentioned a few times, lots of investigators came in. And, in fact, it got so chaotic, it got so crazy that the Roman Catholic Church stepped in.
That's unheard. Like, that's not commonly heard of. What did they
No.
do?
So, they did like a whole investigation. They did
Okay.
a cleansing of the house. And I haven't been able to find the exact document. I've tried following links to get there, but all the links have been closed or like
Got
pulled
it.
down or whatever. But apparently, let me pull up the exact wording. Apparently so the Roman Catholic Church, they came in, they did their little investigation, and they ended up writing a 156-page report on this house.
What?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a small house.
Yes.
3-bedroom.
Yes.
Wow.
So this was unprecedented. The Catholic Church stepping in, writing this long-ass report, which I'm not able to find, though I will
Yeah.
keep looking for it.
Fair.
And the church classified the Union Screaming House as a demonic infestation. Oppression,
No.
obsession, and possession.
So
The church specifically used the word infestation.
yeah. Which means
So-
I'm really glad that the family moved out.
Yes, me too, because demonic infestations are the worst of the worst.
Yeah,
right?
I'm
They
also
just consume.
find it very interesting that they stepped in. Like, I want to know what was a
What led
red
to that
flag that
point?
they saw that they're
Yes,
like, okay, we need
yeah.
to step in, because Ed and Lorraine Warren didn't.
No, they didn't.
Huh.
I think it might have come because of the experiences that Stephen like directly described, of like this black mass that was hunting and searching.
Ah.
It probably just seemed evil. It seemed demonic, and so the Catholic Church stepped in, maybe because it was in Missouri. Missouri
They,
is really
they probably
religious
sent
or
like a
something.
priest or like, and then like a bit. I don't know how it worked. Like they probably
Yeah,
sent.
I've no clue.
They started with a low and it escalated at some
and
point.
they're
at
like,
some
yeah, we need to do this.
So what happened after that investigation?
Not much. I mean, from what I've heard, I'm not exactly sure when that investigation took place.
Mhm.
There's not really a timeline on that.
Okay.
But after the LaChance family moved out, I think it would just, for a bit of time, a couple of years, it stayed nobody was in there. But reports have said that maybe one or two families have lived in the house since that time.
Okay.
But currently it's left unoccupied. I don't know if I know Stephen, he mentioned it turned into a dog kennel in his 2004 reading that I read.
Yeah.
I'm not sure its whereabouts now. I mentioned earlier in the episode, it's incredibly difficult to find any information on the current stance of this house.
Yeah.
Like, there's no public
Like unless you're like
records of
living
it
in
or
Missouri
anything.
or like in town.
So if
Wow.
anyone's from Missouri or Union, Missouri, even, let us know. That would be awesome.
Yeah, like what do you know about this house? Were you one of those
Seriously.
kids that like crossed the street to not walk?
It was like never.
Yeah.
Really Monster House.
Yeah. That is literally Monster House right there.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Now I mentioned Ed and Lorraine Warren were contacted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think they ever got directly involved, but I do think it eventually caught their eye because of media attention, right? So I don't have much detail, but there is a short article written, again, by Stephen LaChance in September of 2014.
Okay.
And so in this, he writes, the great paranormal investigator Lorraine Warren gave Helen, the house's current owner, and I, the house's former owner, a piece of advice right after the doors to the Union Screaming House were closed to us. She said, "It is far from over."
Oof.
And that's how I'm going to end
Wait,
this
was that it?
story. Yeah.
Was that it?
That's it.
I thought there was going to be more.
No, that's all.
Okay.
That's all I could find, at least.
No, that's
So-
great. I mean, I'm glad that the information is out there somewhere, but, somewhere. Wow.
I don't know. This case is a confusing one to me because it seems so real. Because there's all these first-hand accounts, but then it's like, how scripted are they? How rehearsed is it? Where are all these details that I can't find? Where is that 156-page report by the Roman Catholic Church?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna try to find that.
We'll
Very
keep the
soon,
listeners
and
posted.
we'll keep we'll keep everybody posted. So
Yeah.
but yeah, that is the story of the LaChance family in the Screaming House of Union, Missouri.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, never heard of this case. Crazy how much detail there is, especially first-handed. But yeah.
Most when you hear of stories like this also of like moving into a house, and oh gosh, we got such a great deal on it. Well, turns out it's haunted, as they all are so common.
What's very interesting is that this started right off the bat when the family moved in.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's after like remodeling or restoration or
Exactly.
construction.
Yeah. And this
Yeah.
leads me into the point I was just about to make, is that I think before this, I forget exactly which house it was, but like the shortest time that a family had been recorded to live in a home before this was 28 days. So like
Oh, shoot. They got in, they got out.
days. Well, 28 days before they moved out because of the hauntings. I forget which exactly house this is.
Okay.
But for the Union house and the LaChance family, they only lived in the house for 13 days.
13 days?
They only owned it for 13 days.
Yeah.
And everything already had happened, and at that point they moved out after 13 days.
I also find it
full
very
days.
like heartbreaking because they were looking for this like little dream house for him and his kids.
Yeah.
They found it. It's like, oh, it's too good to be true. And then they're like,
And it was.
I'd love for us to stay, but I'm not going to put my children at risk. So
No.
we're leaving.
Especially with the demonic infestation.
Yeah, that he didn't know it was at the time.
No. So, thank God he got him and his family out of that house. And
Yeah.
I hope to God nobody's living in there now.
Yeah. Yeah. Airbnb or something. Even then, no. Actually, no. That's more people in the house.
No.
As I'm thinking of it, I'm like, no. That's many more people in the house.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's the episode.
Thank you, folks, for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.
For you guys, it sounds very nice. For us, there was technical difficulties, but hey.
Yeah, so if you notice some cuts in the video towards the end here, or if you notice that we look different right now than how we looked like 20 minutes ago, well, it's a new day, so
Yes.
yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, folks.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Uh,
Appreciate y'all.
and we'll see you.
Yeah.
Smurf.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Chambers of the Occult. For photos, sources, and anything else mentioned during the episode, check out our website at chambersoftheoccult.com. You'll find everything you need there if you do find yourself wanting more. You can also follow us on all of our socials at Chambers of the Occult and on Twitter at COTO Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, personal anecdotes, or concerns, let us know. fill out our contact form on our website, email us at chambersoftheoccult@gmail.com, or leave us a message on our socials. We would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed what you heard, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It is absolutely the best way to show your support, and it would mean the world. Until next time.